Okay, we're live with Todd Huffman. He's a potential board of directors candidate. And Todd, why don't you just start by telling us some of your background?
Yeah. So originally, I'm a computational neuroscientist, and I did a undergrad in neuroscience and a master's in mathematics. And then I left my PhD in molecular biology to get involved in what we called stability operations. And so I worked in Afghanistan for a number of years doing communications, infrastructure, and energy in rural Afghanistan. And I've had a long interest in open source ecology. And actually, I ran a conference a few years ago where we had Marcin out as a speaker. And this was sort of pre-TED and pre-Kickstarter. And so I've long been interested in the open source ecology movement since I've been involved in projects where we've had to build infrastructure from the ground up, and something that would, I think, be of interest to the open source ecology group is I helped start a fab lab in Afghanistan, which is an open source 3D fabrication laboratory, and there are a number of reasons that's relevant to open source ecology, but probably the biggest one is philosophical. One of the things that we realized when we were implementing technology is that when we brought in a piece of technology into Afghanistan and then implemented it with the local population, that we also brought in a dependency on outside actors. And Afghanistan, really one of the biggest problems they've had is they are so heavily manipulated by third parties who don't have their best interests in mind. And so one of the reasons that we got involved in the Fab Lab is that in addition to bringing technology and infrastructure, we also wanted to bring knowledge of how to build and how to repair and how to maintain that infrastructure. And so, with the Fab Lab, one of the projects that we did is we did something called FabFi, which was an open source mesh network for distributing internet around Jalalabad. And so we taught the Afghan students how to build their own point-to-point antennas, how to flash sort of off-the-shelf Linksys routers to OpenWRT, and how to configure them to distribute internet. And one of the great experiences that we had was basically our perspective is if you could build your own point-to-point rig and get yourself on the network, then you got free access to our internet. And so a lot of the brightest students use that as an opportunity to get access to the internet. And we actually one time did a Skype call to one of our students when I was back here in the United States, where he was at his home in Afghanistan,
Wow.
in very literally a mud hut with no electricity, where he had set up his point-to-point rig on battery so that he could take the internet back to the mud hut with him and then still stay connected, over that very tenuous link. But it was something that he had built himself, and so something that they knew how to repair.
That's amazing.
Go ahead.
That's amazing.
And I can testify that this is worth it. We rely on satellite communications, and there was a heavy windstorm when no one on our team was in Afghanistan, and our satellite dish blew off of the roof and broke. And our Afghan partners were, knew enough, even though they didn't actually know how to repair this, how to actually work with satellite equipment, they knew enough to take the satellite gear, get it back onto the roof, point it, and get the transmitter back onto it. And they put the transmitter back on with rope and tape, and got it working well enough to email us a picture of the broken equipment so that we could order that equipment and bring it out with us next time, versus someone having to travel from the United States to look at the broken equipment, figure out what was going on, and then order replacements.
Yeah, I hear you, man. You really struck a chord with me. I don't think we've really explored this point with our messaging, but it's like if when we get into developing nations, we can do what I don't know what the word is. We can do a type of development that doesn't create dependency. I guess that's one way to talk about it. So we can help them use readily available local resources to develop their own manufacturing centers, and we can give them job skills without making them dependent on technology from developed nations.
Right. And and I think that there is benefit to global trade and global supply chains. Where I think that the real problem comes in is that when newcomers into this network come on as a source of raw materials only, and they provide only raw materials in exchange for the knowledge and talent and the ability to set up, maintain, repair. If they're only a source of raw materials, then they're at an extremely disadvantaged position in this sort of in the global marketplace, because you can get raw materials from other places, but if the developed country holds a monopoly over knowledge, that's a really severe disadvantage.
I mean, the way it's honestly been done and not talked about is governments have been overthrown in order to prop up dictatorships that allow cheap access to raw materials. So, I mean, normally the locals don't have much control over those things anyway.
Yep.
And I know that's a divisive issue, but I feel like if we're going to be authentic about it, that has to be said. That there is a long history of that happening. So I don't see that we're investing in development in developing nations in order to help them have something to trade on the global market. I mean, that is maybe someday, but that's a very long-term goal. In the meantime, it's more about helping people provide for their own needs using readily available resources and responsible development. I mean, in the long run, there might be a network of trade. At least, I mean, I could definitely see trade-based regional economies for sure.
And so one of the big issues and gaps that I see is that a lot of the economic development is done by groups like the World Bank, and actually I think the World Bank does a fair amount, does have positive aspects, and I've worked with them in the past, and there are good people inside of the World Bank. But the way that the World Bank engages with development is they do it from a World Bank to government level. And so when there's a transfer of resources to a country, it goes directly to the government, and the government is responsible for then distributing it down. Sometimes it works out well, but in many cases it does not work out well. And the government uses that technology differential as a mechanism of control and censorship over a population. So, like in Ethiopia, there's only one ISP and one telco, and both are owned by the government, and they are monitored for political dissidents, and it's used as a mechanism to track down political dissidents internally to the country. And that's a real negative aspect of the traditional technology and economic development that are being done by groups like the World Bank, because if you only know how to help out a government and you rely on the government to help out the people, you don't have a lot of options if you're dealing with a government that is, tyrannical or just simply not as generous as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, so we have to be aware of all these circumstances if we ever do really want to get programming done on the ground in developing nations. Because, I mean, in a first world environment, we're not threatening anybody, but we actually are really providing a lot of power to people that could be a destabilizing force in the eyes of established regimes in some nations. So, I mean, that could create more problems than solutions for some people if they get I don't know. It's an interesting topic, and there's people who know way more about it than I do. But anyway, it's like, I mean, how do we refocus this conversation towards like,
Okay.
where do we want to go with this? You got a lot of really interesting skills, man. Can we talk more about like, can you just kind of run through a list of your practical skills? What can you accomplish? What kind of stuff do you know how to actually put into practice?
So let's see. I have a fair amount of experience um, coordinating and implementing complex technologies. Actually, I'll walk you over to one. Can you still see the video?
Yeah, so you have a lot of project management experience.
Yeah, and also sort of like design for very complex technology. So I'm
Okay.
going to flip the camera around.
Sure.
Um, this is, now I can't see what's on the screen. So this is a piece of technology that I'm building right now. It's a high throughput 3D microscope, and what it does is it basically combines microtome and imaging into a single step. And so it's not on here right now, but we have a diamond knife that mounts onto this section, and then we have the tissue samples that mount into here, and this is the microscope objective, and then we have a line scan camera. There we go. Our line scan camera over here that records the data while it's slicing, and then it goes over to this computer where we record it. And so we use this for doing 3D pathology, for doing 3D reconstructions of things like tumors and mouse brains, and I'm using it to trace neurofilaments and vasculature across cubic centimeter spaces with submicron resolution. And so this is a technology that I worked on as a grad student at. It was invented at Texas A&M University, and then I'm taking it and commercializing it, and basically making it practical. And so I built a 4-person team around the project, and we have redesigned the entire system, taking the manufacturing cost from above $350,000 down to below $50,000, while increasing the capacity of the machine by over 100 times, which makes it a realistic piece of machinery to use. When it was developed at Texas A&M, it was basically developed to a prototype level, but they couldn't get it to a stage where it actually made sense for people to use it. And so,
Did it lie dormant for a couple of years?
Yeah, I've been working on that for about 5 years.
No, was the project dormant for a couple of years before you picked it up?
Yes.
Okay.
So I worked on it in 2005 for a couple of years, and then I left the project around 2008, and then about a year ago, I went back over to Texas A&M, and I saw that pieces were still sitting on the workbench in the same spot where they had been left 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so then I negotiated negotiated the patents away from the university, and then took the project and have started running with it again.
And so the machine creates like 3D composites from multiple microscope vantage points, or viewpoints.
So what it does is it slices and images at the same time. So
Okay.
there's a diamond knife, and it puts light through the back of the diamond knife. The light comes out the bevel of the knife, and then the objective is focused on the bevel of the knife, and then the line scan camera images continuously while it slices. And so that allows the process of serial section microscopy to be done without any manual intervention.
Okay, so you can slice tissue and film at the cutting edge of the blade. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Wow. What other skills do you have? Just interested. I mean, do you have any programming experience or like anything that seems
Yeah.
everything. Let's talk about it all.
My master's degree was in bioinformatics, and so as doing my master's degree, it was in the math department, and it was software heavy, and so I had to do algorithm development and write software. My software experience is fairly specialized. I worked in Perl and MATLAB. Perl for doing gene sequence analysis,
Wow.
and then in MATLAB for doing 3D reconstructions, actually using the early version of the microscope that I showed you. And so that was a lot of image processing and 3D representations. I don't do a lot of the modern sort of web development. I do have several software developers who work for me on different projects, and so I manage people who are developing web applications, doing Android applications. Lately, we've been doing a lot of SMS-based communications. One of the things that we found in the developing world, in post-conflict and post-disaster environments, is that SMS is the lowest common denominator of communication, because you can get a single bar of cell phone coverage in almost everywhere in the world, but it's really difficult to get a nice internet connection. And so I've designed and supervised the development of a number of applications that use SMS as the user interface.
Are you interested in being more involved than just being a board member?
So my involvement so far has been mostly through observation. So I was a donor during I was an early donor during the Kickstarter campaign, and I did a lot to try and promote it. And I follow what open source ecology is doing, and actually I was down in Texas 2 weeks ago, and I saw one of the LifeTrack machines, and recognized what it was, and went over and talked to people who had brought it there. I am very interested in coming out to your facilities and actually spending some time working on things. There are a number of areas that I have an interest in that open source ecology, I think, will eventually develop into. So I have a lot of interest in communications. In addition to point-to-point wireless internet, I'm also a pretty avid ham radio operator, and use unconventional radio and communication techniques in a lot of my various projects. And so I think that there are things that I might be able to do to help the open source ecology community learn how to do communications in a way where they're not dependent on third parties to provide that infrastructure. I'm not completely up on what the current needs of open source ecology are, and so if I came on the board, probably the first thing that I would do would be to schedule a trip out to the open source ecology facilities so that I can meet the people who are actually involved in it on a daily basis and figure out what the needs are. I would like to actively help out with things like fundraising and figuring out how to insert open source ecology into real world problems. I think there are a lot of areas that could really benefit from the perspective that open source ecology brings, as well as the knowledge base it's putting together. I do a lot of work with World Bank, USAID, United Nations, and people that actually, I was wearing a United Nations hat earlier. People who are part of the old guard and the traditional groups that are concerned with a lot of the things where you can apply open source ecology techniques. And a lot of them are a lot of those large organizations have very backwards ways of handling technology development. A lot of it is, they airdrop in they airdrop in fairly random and poorly thought out pieces of technology trying to help. But by not having a really good framework to think about these things in, they screw it up a lot. And so I think that's an area where, like at a strategic and policy level, I might be able to help organize funding, help get people who are adherents to the open source ecology sort of framework, and get them involved in things that they might otherwise not have access to.
What kind of funding sources?
So there are a pretty wide range of funding sources that are available. Most of them aren't accessible to to people who are just getting involved in it. Like like the World Bank puts a lot of money into technology development. The process of actually receiving money from the World Bank is reasonably complicated. Like you have to be an authorized vendor to even apply, and if you look at the forms, it actually tells you that in order to apply to be an authorized vendor, you need to have a history of providing services to the bank. But how do you do that without being a vendor?
Right, you gotta know somebody, huh?
Yeah, you have to know someone, and then your business has to be in business for 3 years, and there's a very sort of complicated and onerous set of documentation that you have to provide. And so, if there was a group of 3 or 4 people from the open source ecology community that wanted that saw a need within the World Bank, and there was interest on the bank side in providing funding to actually, to do the research or to do the implementation somewhere, I have the ability to step in and negotiate like the contracting, bureaucratic, and legal hurdles for actually making that contract flow through, so that money can actually get to the spot that it needs to. And a lot of those hurdles have been put in there by companies who don't want things to change, because they have a very strong vested interest financially in preventing innovation from coming into their space. And so I think for the long-term growth of things like open source ecology, I think that's pretty important to be able to figure out. There are people in the United States who are interested in this, but really I think a lot of the most powerful applications of the open source ecology R&D are in areas that are outside of the United States, who are are areas where there's already technology, but it's technology that is brought in from outside of that country, where you have a dependency, or it's in countries that don't yet have the technology, and you want to help them prevent those dependencies, from holding their country back. And so, if you're going to get involved in those things, you need to be able to navigate the larger machinery of international technology and development. And it's a kind of thing where you need to have the contacts and you need to have the experience. Not everyone needs to have it, but you need to have someone on the team who can step in and say, here's how this contracting mechanism works. We can put the contract through this company, and groups like the U.S. government, like with USAID, they don't write checks for less than $1 million. And so if you want to do a smaller project, you have to run it through a prime contractor, and the prime contractors will try and take 15-20% of the money just as overhead, unless you know people in that community and have the ability to negotiate. And when I do my contracts with the U.S. government, like the prime contractors that I use take 2.5 to 5% of the money off as overhead and as profit. Because I have a long track record with them, and because I know the negotiation points, and I know what sort of things they care about. And so, I think as open source ecology moves forward, I might be able to help the community be more effective and have less overall sort of bureaucratic and strategic and implementation headaches, just because I've had to navigate these spaces before.
Yeah, that's a huge asset. We just applied for, we just put a LOI in for a USAID grant. They have some kind of new application process this year where instead of like a longer grant proposal, you write like you fill out basically a form. And I think it's just it's probably smart on their way to kind of weed through a lot of applicants that way just right off the bat. And it was just for stage one funding. But maybe if they accept us and want a full proposal, would you be willing to help us out with that?
Yeah, so I can help out proposals, with writing, but also with, like strategic issues. Then, like there's actually a lot of strategy involved in doing large projects with the U.S. government, especially if you're taking research money. And different kinds of money have different kinds of restrictions on it. Most of the stuff that I do falls under research, but I have a leg firmly in implementation. And so, one of the things that the researchers don't realize is that what the program manager in the U.S. government is looking for a transition partner. So they're going to put money into a research investment, but they need to see that someone is going to use it, and not just like in a vague sense that if we develop this piece of technology, then someone has this problem and then we'll use it. You need to actually find the person on the implementation and fielding side who has that problem, who can say, I have this problem, if this is developed, I will put money into solve it, I will purchase this solution and use it to solve my problem. And that's how you move through, from like phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 of the projects. Like, one source of funding that's nice is like the small business innovation and research grants, the SBIRs. So they have a phase 1 of $90,000, a phase 2 of $1 million, and a phase 3 of $3 million. Most of the people who receive phase 1 SBIRs focus just on the technology development, but the major reason that people do not receive a phase 2 or phase 3 is not because that the technology didn't work, it's because they didn't find and get an agreement from a transition partner with someone else inside of the U.S. government who is willing to buy that product down the line. And
does it have to be somebody in the government to buy your product? Could a transition partner be just someone who needs it in a developing nation?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be someone in the U.S. government. It can also be, it can actually be any consumer. It can be any consumer who is going to use it, because, you as the company who's received the SBIR define your commercialization pathway. They really like to see at least some other U.S. government involvement. And the reason is that inside the U.S. government, there's a lot of like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And if one group, so like I'm on an SBIR right now, I found several other groups inside of U.S. government who have said that they'll put in, if we get a phase 2 for $1 million, that they will put in $50,000 during phase 2 before the technology is even finished to help with the development, and committing, showing that they're committed to that process, and that really increases the chances of getting the phase 2, because that increases the confidence of the program manager that they're making a wise investment. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they take the programs that they funded and they go back to their boss and say, boss, here are the research investments that we made, and here are the things that I can use to demonstrate to you that I correctly made the right assessment on which group was fulfilling the most need, and then also the group that was really willing to reach out and build a larger community around the effort, and show that there's a broader need than just one on paper.
I got a number of thoughts running through my head. Okay. It sounds like that that's something that we'll have to bring to the table, as far as like, because I'm starting to get intuitions that our culture might define a different path, and wanting to go through this, like this channel of funding and global expansion. That's something that's going to have to be decided upon as a team, probably, because
Yep.
there are different nuanced philosophies guiding this, and we just got to make sure it's going to fit. But I mean, so far, on the face of it, it seems really appealing to have you on the inside and to help shepherd us through that process, and make sure we don't have to experience a lot of the bureaucratic erosion that a lot of others might, or whatever, and to help us develop strategic partnerships. But that's just one thing you're offering, is help with government grants and funding
Yeah,
mechanisms.
and
There's lots of other things that I'm really excited to work with you on.
yeah, and the you know, uh, the ability to work with and move money through the U.S. government is, um, you know, that's not what I would consider like the thing that I'm most excited about in the world. In practice, it turns out to be one of the things that most people don't understand. And so if 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 my involvement only serves to warn you off of and keep and tell you and help you understand what things to avoid, that is probably also, would be a great service. And I'm more than happy to help out as a member of the board or just as a volunteer with open source ecology. So, if you, I just found out a couple days ago when I was talking to Colby that you that you were reaching out and looking for additional people to get involved, and that you were interviewing for board positions. And so, I said, hey, we make it, send them a note because I'm interested in that. If you end up going with someone else for the board, I don't have any ego associated with this, and you should feel welcome and free to reach out to me, regardless.
Could we create some kind of transparent like documentation around this, or some curriculum, just to kind of like create some kind of training mechanism, so that other people can gain from your experience and benefit from your experience. So if we could like summarize your knowledge of this topic into some kind of video or something, a couple wiki entries. Are you interested in
Yeah,
that too?
yeah, and there are uh, depending on the topic, there are training materials and information that I have that I can make available in, either by posting it up on the internet, or sometimes groups have copyright around their training materials, and so I don't feel comfortable posting it directly on the internet. But there are things that I would certainly be willing to share on a one-on-one basis if someone's actually getting involved in, if someone starts doing an SBIR, I would gladly share all my SBR materials, even if I can't post them openly on the internet.
Okay, or we could get, because we're going to have a team of documenters, and they could work with you to take what you have to teach and create training materials, so that
Oh yeah,
we can.
that would be great too. Like, and actually, one of the things that bothers me in the world is that so many educational materials are locked up in really unusable formats. And there's nothing super secret about any of these educational materials. It's just people very aggressively slap intellectual property around it, and then then that knowledge is locked up. I'd be more than happy to work with people to try and free some of that knowledge up.
Yeah, either that or the materials are like really dense and long, and this is only one step in a 1,000-step journey. It's like if we could make it more concise and consumable too, that's another advantage of that. So let's kind of sum up this meeting. It sounds like you want to come out to Factory Farm. Do you know when you would like to do that?
Um, when would be a good time to do it? I travel a lot, and so what I would do is I would just work it into one of my travel schedules where I could stop in.
Sometime in like July would be a good time, probably.
Okay. And actually, just how do people get there?
Kansas City.
Okay.
just fly into Kansas City, and then it's like an hour north. You can take. I mean, someone could probably pick you up. We're gonna have like 17 people there in July, so someone will probably be able to just come down and get you.
Okay.
Um, you don't have any
And
interest in getting your current employer couldn't like pay for you to go on hiatus and work for us. Is there an option for that?
um, so I'm self-employed, and I have a number of complicated arrangements. Um, I have a couple small companies, and then there are some larger companies that I work for, but as a consultant. So my schedule is, um, you know, doing what I do. It's like there's no such thing as vacation. There's only days I don't get paid. And so if I want to do something, I just have to, figure out that I want to do it and plan ahead and make the arrangements. And I don't know if you guys have internet and electricity where you are, but a lot of what I do is, I telecommute. So there's possibility for a hybrid where I could come out and, as long as I could get a couple hours a day in the morning or the evening, at my computer, I could sort of keep things going without people realizing that I'm off doing some actual work.
Okay, yeah, we're an off-grid facility, but we do have power and internet.
Okay.
Do you have any electrical experience?
Um, not as much as I'd like.
Do you have any fabrication experience or like other hands-on stuff?
I have some fabrication experience, and then I also have a mechanical engineer who works for me, who I collaborate with a lot on more complicated fabrication.
So he's available to be an advisor.
Yeah, so he's a mechanical engineer. He's a mechanical engineer from MIT, who has designed and built CNC machines, and he's the primary mechanical designer around the microscope that I showed you. And there are actually some other people in our direct community who may be of interest. Like I have a small hardware and bio co-working space in San Francisco, which is where I run my company out of, the microscope company. And there's a fellow here named Alex Kiselev, who's a 20 under 20 Teal fellow, and he's working on open source scientific equipment fabrication, and so he also has a lot of mechanical and fabrication design experience. So depending on what the needs are, I guess most of the resources that I have at my disposal are they're more on like high tech, high precision equipment. But once I get a little bit more oriented in what the current problem space is with open source ecology, I can probably figure out like where the best application of the resources are.
That's great. Yeah, we have a Teal fellow on site, by the way.
Oh, cool. Who?
Yunso. What's his last name? Kang, I think. I can't remember his last name, but Yunso.
Yeah, I've certainly met him. I think I remember which one he is. I'm a mentor for the Teal Fellows, and so I go to the selection meetings and meet I interview the incoming Teal Fellows.
Do you know Peter Teal?
I have met him multiple times. Not on a. I know enough people in his organizations to send things to him, but I would not feel comfortable calling him at 3 a.m.
Okay. Right.
And actually, my microscope company is actually funded by Peter Teal. We're being funded by Breakout Labs.
Okay. Awesome. Excellent. So let's wrap this up. I will check in with Marcin, and I'll publish this video, and he'll take a look at it. I don't see any barriers to you coming out in July and just doing a visit and checking it out. Um,
Yep.
and then I guess, yeah. Are you comfortable? Because as you can imagine, as a startup, we've got probably like 30 or 40 pans in the fire. So are you comfortable with communication just being a little spotty, happening over the next 2 weeks? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so he'll take a look at it, but soon we'll want to get you like set up to come out sooner than later. So I'll make sure it doesn't take too long. But if there is any kind of delay, it's not an indication of our interest. It's just
Okay. No worries. I totally understand. It's I am insanely busy as well. But it's like they say, if you need something done, give it to people who are busy. So I totally understand why that's the case.
yeah,
I'd like to come out and to see open source ecology anyway. It's been something that I've been wanting to do ever since ever since I first became aware of what Marcin's doing. And so I'll start looking at my July schedule and figure out. I'm going to be going to DC. I'm sure at some point in July, and so I'll put it on either side of that DC trip.
yeah. If you could actually follow up with me on your availability in July, that would help.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll do.
Okay, thank you so much for your interest, and I'm excited to talk to you more about it, and we'll see what we can do. Okay.
All right,
All
sounds
right.
great. Great talking to you.
Thanks.